Hello, hello, hello. So we have the pleasure of getting the bar open soon. So we recognize that with the last panel. And it's been a long day, I'm sure, but hopefully one of learning. What makes this panel different is that in all the others, there were largely PR people talking to PR people. The intent of this session was to try and get an outside-in view of how our profession is perceived by others. And who are those wonderful others that we have? We have on my extreme left, there, as you know, Deepak Ajwani. He is the editor of economictimes.com. And I had the pleasure of speaking to him earlier this year, where I was on a mission to find out what is different about the world of digital, and I hope he will share some of those learnings with all of you today on how the online world is shifted and what we as PR people need to do differently when dealing with the media. We then have Ratna Viswanathan, who's the CEO of Reach to Teach, and I'll tell you a little bit more about her in a minute. And then on my right, Satwinder Singh, who's a partner with Vaish Associates. So let me spend a minute getting y'all to know a little bit about these wonderful people on stage. So Deepak started off with the Digit magazine. So he's worked in print, and he's also had a taste of TV with Tech Tree TV. And then he went all in into what we call pure digital first approach when he joined Forbes in 2008. He came on board with ET in 2016, and when he joined the digital reach, if I remember right, Deepak was about 12 million when you came on in 2016, and today it's blown past the 60 million mark, and in 5 years, that's an incredible growth. So lots to learn from this journey for us as PR practitioners on how we need to adapt and reinvent ourselves. Ratna brings in 21 years of work with the Government of India as a career civil servant of the Indian Accounts and Audit Service with the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. She was also seconded to the Ministry of Defense for 6 years and to the public broadcaster Prasar Bharati. And in her new avatar in the not-for-profit arena, she's been at the helm of Oxfam India and VSO India, and now, as I mentioned, the CEO of Reach to Teach, and has much to teach us on how we can do PR differently for the social impact sector. And Satwinder heads the corporate law practice in Delhi for Vaish Associates. He's worked across all sorts of corporate and commercial laws, including inbound, outbound investments, corporate restructuring, JVs, private equity transactions, and public issues. So with the three of them, we have a representation of many, many audiences that we as PR people deal with. So the fourth and the fifth estate is represented by Deepak in the various avatars that he has played. Ratna brings in the world of government and the exciting world of ESG and social impact. And Satwinder, the complex world of regulation. And we, PR people, are in the center or the vortex of, or the intersection of many of these forces when it comes to shaping and protecting reputation. So that's the context of the outside-in view. And I'm going to open this discussion up by asking Ratna first. Ratna, what does a PR person, all of us sitting in this room, need to learn or maybe unlearn when it comes to behavior change communication working in the social impact arena?
Thank you, Nikhil. That's a very interesting question. Typically, I think when not-for-profits engage with the PR sector, it's primarily aimed at a couple of things. One is, of course, building visibility, and the other is about building perception of the entity concerned, right? And the primary reasons for both of these is A, perception with stakeholders like the government, like other agencies that they may need to be working with, and also the fact that typically the not-for-profit sector is looking for grants and donations. So there needs to be a public visibility and a credible public visibility, and that's a story which needs to be told, and that's why the entire engagement with PR firms Having said that, to be very honest, a large number of the not-for-profit sector does not really engage with PR firms for the simple reason there are other priorities. And, a lot of them are cash-strapped and money being scarce. Something like PR, whereas everybody would love the visibility, goes a begging because it's an expensive proposition, to say the least. And sometimes I think it's a great idea if PR firms also started looking at, a social impact wing that would work with the really small NGOs who don't have either the resources or the wherewithal, to reach out to PR, but have wonderful stories to tell. And if you look at it from a human interest perspective, these are stories that can evoke a lot of interest. They may not be sensational and certainly not bad news, but definitely, lovely human interest stories. So I think that's something PR agencies could look at, creating social impact verticals that could engage with very small not-for-profits to tell some really important and interesting stories, because there's a lot of wonderful work that's happening all over this country, including the remotest areas where very, very small agencies are working. So I think that's one. And I think the second thing about, PR is that usually it's a start and stop story, right? You engage PR for a particular, what should I say, a particular piece, and that's where it stops. And in my opinion, I think PR needs to be more 360 degrees and be more involved with the organization beyond just the perception building and the image building, and try to actually understand the ethos and what makes organizations run. And today, because it's a commercial engagement, that doesn't happen. Thank you.
Thank you. So, in service of society, truly, and therefore a nice idea for all of us to think about, and an ongoing effort rather than a start and stop approach. So thank you for that. So Deepak, can I bring you in again, similar kind of question. Think of us as the class of 2022, 23, trying to figure out how we need to engage better, more meaningfully with impact, with media as a stakeholder. What does this class need to know? Thank you.
Two requests. Can you raise the volume of this? Because there's a lot of back chatter which makes it difficult to hear even Ratna. Can you just raise the volume or the speaker volume here so that we could hear each other? The other request, I'm speaking in my personal capacity, not representing my organization. So if by any chance, reporting, tweeting, Instagramming, just say about my name and not my organization, because I'm here to personally air my views, not my organizations. Nikhil, coming back to your question, what should the class of 2020 or 2022?
2022.
Understand or learn about digital media?
In fact, I think you've already given us the first lesson, right? That disclosure that you made right up front.
True, yeah, because being in media, you have to be first and foremost be responsible to yourself and the workplace that you represent. Otherwise, look, in one thing that I've learned from my personal experience, I made a personal switch 100% digital media by joining Economic Times. Prior to that, at Forbes, I had a first digital and then print kind of role and experience. But very clearly, the reach is substantial. And again, if I were to just rattle off numbers like you explained, I joined economictimes.com when we were 12 million unique visitors a month. That was our reach in 2016, 1st Jan when I joined. Thanks to the great digital penetration, thanks to Mukesh Ambani who reduced the prices of kilobytes and megabytes, today we already reached 60 million. During COVID, we were 100 million unique visitors a month. So that's mighty. That is the kind of reach and impact and thereby the responsibility also that lies on our shoulders when we communicate even a single word on our platform. That is what maybe in the PR community people need to understand and the impact of it. I have grown more on print as a newspaper. Maybe the CEOs that the PR community talks to always possibly ask them, मेरा न्यूज़पेपर में रिपोर्ट कब छपेगा, आर्टिकल कब छपेगा, मैगजीन में आर्टिकल फोटो कब आएगा. Maybe you need to unlearn yourself or you need to unlearn them saying photo छपेगा, impact milega, but that's just making you happy. You're responsible for the stakeholders whom you represent. They are on a different platform and different planet. And that's what you need to learn. I remember a simple line that the Forbes US editor once had come down and told us. He said, you know, it's funny when I go and meet a CEO, he tells me, you know what, now that you've done my interview and Forbes magazine will publish something, my mom will be happy. He said the funny guy didn't understand that if I publish on the website, millions of readers will be happy. And that's what he's responsible. But he's more concerned about his mom and the happiness that his mom will find. That's the difference. That, you know, the world has traveled. Readers have moved and migrated substantially. Their first touch or their first port of call for a lot of people, not just the younger, because that's the perception that digital is only for the younger or maybe under 30. It's not. COVID has substantially changed our habits. Handset is the maximum amount of space and the time that you spend with. That's where people are possibly reaching first. So that's something that I myself have learned a lot. I learned from my own daughter who never touches the paper as a medium, but her port of call is that. And if I were to take Economic Times as a brand to reach across the masses and get newer audience, the newer crop of audience is only going to come from digital and not from print or television. The first port of call for all readers and people who consume information, good, bad, ugly, is digital. And that's what, you know, I think is important to understand and accept over a period of time, that if that is the port of call for people, that is where your messaging will need to be tailored to and branded with or even communicated to. That's a very critical lesson, because in all the planning, like in our website planning, when we make, the design team will first make a design for desktop. 70-80% of my readers are on mobile. We've had to put posters in our office saying mobile first. If 80% of your audience is reading on devices, why are you starting your design first on the desktop? Mera website CinemaScope mein kaisa lagega? Abandon that thought. First think of that 6-inch device. Mere website pe reader kaise consume karega? What are the areas? What makes them click on a button or on a story or on a, you know, navigation bar? That's very critical to understand. If 80% of your audience is there, accept the reality. There's no point. We all work on laptops, but our readers are on desktop, mobile. Sometimes I feel I should just keep, in every, you know, team of mine, we should have mobile phone as our screen and start looking at it more. Then we'll automatically ingrain that that is the kind of audience and that's the screen that we are reaching or working towards. And that's critical to understand for us.
Thank you, Deepak. So I guess a fundamental shift in the way we approach our work, and I love that very real example of behavior change being really tough, right? To get people to logically understand it is one thing, but to actually do it differently, I guess for all of us is, we've talked about it many times, the good old-fashioned press release continues to be our number one tool in our toolbox, and we have to start thinking differently in the way that we distribute that content. So a little bit on behavior change from both our panelists. Bringing Satwinder in now, there is a lot of regulatory compliance that one needs to navigate. And as a PR professional, Satwinder, can you throw some light to this audience on what you feel we need to do to navigate that better? Because the disclaimer here is, having sat in many meetings with legal teams, I keep getting told, ye nahi kar sakte, wo nahi kar sakte, you can't do this, you can't do that. So how do we get around it? How do we collaborate better with legal to deliver more impact? Yeah, that's my question.
Thank you, Nikhil. I think when Vaish called me up that we also need a lawyer for this bit, I was wondering that what I have to usually say in the PR conference for that. But my experience with PR, because I think when we engage even the Adfactor for that public issue, I think it's very important for PR people to adapt themselves for whatever the regulatory provisions, because if you feel that you have to get into the one area, into that PR, into the financial or into the capital market, which is one of the most remunerative practice area, what we need to see is that what all are the regulatory provisions which are applicable. That's number one. You see, way back from 2015, when the prevention of insider trading regulations happens, so they came out with the fair disclosure code. Then it was amended. When it was amended, they said, no, all listed companies have to have a fair disclosure code. Earlier, they were providing certain events that, okay, you have to provide it. Then they got into the materiality concepts. When they got into the materiality concepts, they said, okay, these are the events. They listed about 17 events. Those events are deemed to be the materially sensitive information, and you have to provide the disclosures. And it's a concept of unpublished price sensitive information which you have to give, because any information will have the impact if it is not there on the price, and you can manipulate the price or the way the market reacts. Ultimately, it is for the investors' confidence. And the way I see is that the role of PR, that how they connect, I would see that PR it's a backbone of any corporate's reputation. They can make or break that reputation even for this, if they are not aware of this. So they must adapt to this, that okay, what is regarded as a material, what is supposed to be the information which the board has to decide on that materiality concepts, and then certain events which are required to be given. There are like, I think the way I look at it is there is a very fine distinction, because you have to meet the regulations. When you have to meet the regulations, probably within the four corners of regulation, you have to tell what you are going to say and what is the meaning. Meaning is that what is being told, what is to be told to the people at large, at the society, and what is being said on the papers. Even there is a very, very fine distinction. Yeah, you have to convey the meaning, but what you are saying, I'll just give you the example. They said that, okay, you cannot give a forward-looking statements. I'm just making an example. No, you can't say that, okay, my profits would be these much crores. But on the other side, when you are saying that, okay, we are saying and we have that estimates of growth in the range of that, probably then we will say that it is coming within the four corners of law. Sometimes it happens that, okay, what is the information? Because it's very, very important to see that information, apart from the materiality, it must be concrete, it must be clear, right? And it must be credible, right? So on that basis, I'll give you the example which I thought that I must share with you. Recent case law of Urja Global. And I could see that one of the rarest scientific scam, they coined the word of any chemical material as a Jacobite and made a press release that we are entering into a long-term contract with the Japanese company for supply of Jacobites. And the price moved up. Now, come what may, what is happening is that they said that there is no chemical event in the name of Jacobite. Neither it is in their annual returns. Even the Japanese company said that, okay, we don't have this. But what is being said is the false information.
So is that the key takeaway for the PR practitioner, that
Yes.
we need to keep our wits about us,
Yes,
know the law?
you must look at it, the law, you must verify, you must adapt to this thing, that what is being published, whether it is right or wrong. And now what the SEBI did, they have barred the company, they have barred the promoters, the key people from entering into the capital market for next a few number of years.
Thank you, Satwinder. So a reminder to us that as the custodians of image of our own clients, we must hold our profession to that standard. We must know the regulation, ask the hard questions, and have the courage to stand up and counsel when we feel something needs not to be done. So Ratna, if I can bring the mic back to you. One of the similarities that I often think between the world of social impact and the world of public relations is this dichotomy between input measures and outcome or impact. So I often hear that people want to invest in CSR when there is infrastructure or ribbon cutting and there is a building to show or, there is something to show. But the real work often is about capacity building, training, and there's no ribbon to cut there, right? There's no glory to be had there. Similarly, in our world of PR, oftentimes it's about the exposures, right? Did we get the front page? Did we trend? But did behavior change? These seem to be commonalities between our industries. Is there anything you could elaborate on how you handle that? Maybe we can learn from it.
So, typically with the development sector, you have this whole thing around MEL. MEL is monitoring, evaluation, and learning, right? And the assumption is that MEL is specific to the development sector. And so typically it's something that nobody else talks about. But if you look at the principle of it, it's basically embedding impact parameters into any kind of work that you're doing so that you are concurrently getting a sense of where it's heading, right? It's not just quantitative impact. It goes beyond that. And usually what happens is, instead of starting out with something and then looking for impact, define impact and work backwards. And you probably are going to see the result that you wanted. On the other hand, if you start and then go, looking for impact, it might be going in a different direction. And so one is not really aware of it. So for me, I think something like monitoring evaluation is cross-sectoral. And although today it's specifically used by the development sector, in terms of the principles around it, I think that's something that can be used by all industry to look at impact and, to look at it top down rather than, starting with the program and going towards the impact. So that's something I think that's really critical and is cross-cutting. Thanks.
Wonderful, thank you. So that's a new acronym I learned. I shall read up more about MEL. Deepak, since we're on acronyms, one of my favorite is KISS. The most known word KISS is about keep it simple, stupid, and of course in communication that works. But the KISS I'm going to go with is an acronym for keep, improve, start, stop. So what should we as PR practitioners in dealing with media keep doing, improve, start, and stop?
Keep okay. Keep doing the good work that you believe in and not just what your client believes in, because it's important. Look, for any, not just PR professional, for any professional, if you are dealing with someone, if you earn enough trust, then you will build the confidence to tell the person what is right and wrong. For any PR professional, it's important to understand that the company or the CEO or the promoter has, engaged with you because you're the eyes and ears where his eyes and ears cannot reach. So make sure that you've earned enough trust so that you can keep, flowing back the information as honestly as possible, saying, hey, this is where it's going wrong. If you don't have the courage or the temerity to go back and tell the promoter, this is where things are going wrong and we need to work at it, then you're not being able to do your job. But yes, it takes a lot of courage and trust building to begin with, to be able to give back the accurate or the correct information to do that. Improve. One thing that I'll tell you, the only thing that I feel whenever I get a press release or a pitch note or a call, improve your own reading. There's no other way to understand how media works or how, journalists respond. If you understand more about your domain and you understand about the person you're talking to, then you'll be far more articulate in what you're trying to pitch. My WhatsApp status very clearly says, do not WhatsApp me, SMS if it's urgent, or mail me. For the simple reason, and to some, I'm sorry to say, even in Adfactors, when they've messaged me, I've said, look, I'm not your buddy. I cannot respond to your WhatsApp. If all your press releases are going to come on WhatsApp, when am I going to have time to respond to my wife, to my kid, or to my colleague? It's not possible. So understand who you're talking to and what mode of communication they will accept or would trust you more with. it's very important to understand. Look, for a journalist, I'll give you my perspective because that's what I've been called for. I get 300 mails and maybe 200 out of them are press releases. Even I have the responsibility to sift through what is relevant for my reader because that's my stakeholder. You're the great source, valuable information that you're sending me 200 pieces of information. I have to sift through. Maybe 30, 40 or 80 of them are valid or relevant for the reader that I cater to. There is one thing that I have noticed in press releases, now they are articulated in a form and manner that it's like a perfect article written. आपको मेहनत नहीं करनी है, हमारा आर्टिकल जैसा लिखा हुआ प्रेस रिलीज है बस आप छाप दो. The mail comes, then a call comes. Some kid, somebody is deployed, मेल भेजने का, फोन करने का, पूछने का सर प्रेस रिलीज मिला है, आप छाप रहे हो कि नहीं छाप रहे हो. I think we need to do away with those practices. Because I have a responsibility towards my reader while you have been deployed to just do a call center service. Don't do that. Some people might just not be happy with it or might get angry कि यार तुमने भेजा है उसका मतलब मुझे छापना ज़रूरी तो नहीं है ना. Let me at least read. Many times 601 the mail comes and 602 the call comes. Press release भेजा है, आपने क्या करना है बता देंगे. 10 minutes later छापा कि नहीं छापा. अरे give me a break and a breath, right? So coming back, improve your understanding of the person you're engaging with or the domain. I get calls saying, you know, food and service में ये हो रहा है आप छाप दो. But have you even done research? What do I write on? Or who am I in the organization? So I mean, improve your understanding of domain, people you talk to, or you know at least the experts you talk to. You can't call a telecom journalist and you know pitch a food and service story or a pitch, right? You need to understand some basic of understanding. That's what knowledge management bulletins, I'm sure, which a lot of professional agencies train and guide at least at the early stage. What was the other? KI and then the?
Keep, improve, start, stop.
Start. Well, start reading again. I mean, there's no end to it. But in our profession, and I personally believe, and I tell my team, this is the best profession. You're paid to read. If you love reading and writing, there's no other profession. If you are in the profession of communication, please continue reading forever because that will help you become a far more informed person in all spheres of life, makes you more articulate. Even your client, if supposedly you have a client on cloud computing, if you understand that domain, if you're able to hold a conversation with the CEO, I can bet you your next pitch, you'll be able to raise the price by 20%. By simply making sure that the CEO, the jargons that he speaks, if you are able to understand or throw back a few more jargons in the world of cloud computing, you've earned the pitch with a higher revenue next time. Because people expect well-informed communicators. You're in the world of communication, make sure you understand everything. And the last one, what was the?
Stop.
Okay. Stop spamming. Everyone, from telecom networks to everyone, just keeps believing, मैं 50 भेज दूंगा तो एक तो मिलेगा. Stop spamming. Be very focused. Sharp, laser sharp focus where it will work and where it will not work. Do your own due diligence if you're pitching it to a television or a internet company or even a print media. Who is more likely to accept your pitch note or your story or your piece of information? Definitely, understand those first instead of doing a spray and pray approach. That might not work. In fact, there have been, I'll give you a simple example once happened. Some 80 journalists were marked on a press release, not in BCC but CC. Everyone. Thankfully, I got 79 of my peers' mail IDs, which I never had. But that's not the way to pitch anyone. Stop spamming. I'm being very brutal honest here, but that's the reality. If I see 79 people in CC and you've sent me a press release, obviously you've not focused and sharpened the communication to me. You've done a spray and pray approach. Do not do that. Decide your focus. Figure out who is the person likely to, accept or understand your pitch note, or maybe basis your relationship of the past, he or she will accept it, and then go about it. That's
Thank you, Deepak.
Thank you.
Some really simple but reminders to us on what we need to do better as a profession. Eye on the clock. So with permission from my my legal department. I'm going to the audience now and open to take questions from the audience. Yes. 2 hands up right in front.
Deepak, might sound like sabotage because I'm a PR professional. And time and again, we've heard today from journalists that, we are spamming you. Our agencies are spamming you. They are under the pressure pump to spam all of you. I won't tell you my name.
That's unfair. You know my name, you reveal yours then.
So I just tweeted on to you. So you can see that I'm Anandita. I'm from NetApp, a technology company. But what else can we do? We are a country of 1 billion plus people, and media universe is huge. But yet everybody wants to get print in ET, TOI, or if not print, at least online de do yaar. So why are we PR professionals always at the wrong receiving end of things when we say things like, please publish our press release? How is it that in the media universe of lakhs of journalists, you know that more than me, how do we really pinpoint the 1 or 2 people who we could really go after? And will they like us if we go after them? Or will they tell us something like this on a stage one day?
So first and foremost, when you talk to a digital journalist, you never use the line, print nahi to yaar digital de do.
I started with sabotage.
I'm just telling you. I, for myself, never think digital is any less or lesser than television or print. They all are doing everything that, they see us and they say, oh man, this digital is taking us and eating us all over. So
No,
that's why I said.
I was saying ET and TOI specifically.
Everything. No, ET print bhi hai, ET digital bhi hai, and I myself think ET एक entity नहीं, ET की 3 entity है. I go back and tell all people, हमारा television भी है, हमारा print भी है, और digital भी है, आप जो करना है करके दिखा दो. Anyway, coming back. No, it's very simple. I get your point, or your pain point rather, that you have been told to be able to make sure that somewhere it appears in some form and manner, right? And I'll tell you, there are a lot of people who figured out some method, at least for et.com, that let me route it through wires. So they will give it to PTI, Reuters, ANI, INS, multiple agencies, right? For us, we definitely have multiple layers of selection. Agency is one route, our own self is the other route, our bureau, which gives enough valuable inputs, and we are available on WhatsApp throughout with them also, multiple sources of information. While we understand that you have a job to do, our challenge is that we also have a job to do. If you have some new feature, or in your case, if it's NetApp, you have something on the enterprise level for a B2B client, right? While my reporter is trying to figure out a B2C story, obviously B2B will not be something that I'll fancy, because that's not my KRA, that's not my mandate. That's why it's important for you to figure out and also go back and communicate to your stakeholders that, hey, if X reporter is talking about B2B solutions, then he or she will find favor with it. Let me sharpen my focus and figure out which magazine. Look at, I worked in trade magazines also earlier, right? And B2C magazines also earlier. You have to figure out where you'll get much ROI for your story. Like I said, the other example, पेज 1 पे छप गया या उस वेबसाइट पे छप गया जहाँ पे आपके कस्टमर्स नहीं है, क्लाइंट्स नहीं है, स्टेक होल्डर्स नहीं है, वैनिटी है, there's nothing else to it, right? The ROI actually lies elsewhere. Maybe a trade magazine where the NetApp, one article of NetApp might yield some conversion or a client, right? So it's important to, that's why I said, if you know more about your business, you'll also know more where it'll turn the ROI for you. So you don't need to chase the big or fancy brands. Relevant brands are more important.
So the one last question for the evening. I have seen lots of times up signals to me, and then awards. Yeah.
My name is Navodita. I teach media studies at Bennett University. I had 2 questions. First is regarding the behavior change theories. that the major hurdle in implementing government policy is disengaged and inactive public participation. So how do you make a effective communication strategy, especially where there's a huge digital divide as well? And now we're mainly talking all about digital PR. So how will we become more effective? And my second question is to Mr. Deepak. I have a lot of students coming to me and asking that journalism has been reduced to a PR job because there are a lot of PR stories in the newspapers. So, very serious note, some people say that basic tenets of journalism are being compromised. So, could you throw some light on that?
So Ratna, you want to take the behavior change one and then closing from Deepak?
To be fair, initially, yes, government was dense, opaque, didn't engage at all with media, had their own agencies, and they, you had the most boring outputs that came through those agencies, which was stodgy, not really, read worthy, all of that. But to be fair, over the years, I think that has undergone a big change. And today, I think every department is on a digital platform. So there's Twitter, there's Insta, there's a whole lot of stuff that government engages in, because I think there's a recognition of the fact that there's a need to build a certain image. To be fair to government, because they're the largest public facing agency, they're visible. So it's easy to slam the government, right? Other sectors, you don't really talk about and see and look at it in that way because they're not public facing. So there is a need today, and in the past there was a certain arrogance that we are the government. We don't need to build an image, right? Today that has changed, which is why you have every agency represented on media, on social media, because I think the touch points are far higher on social media than they are on print and television. So as a result, today I think that story has changed, and there is more openness in terms of engaging with media, which in the past was more suspect, and you just go to the agencies you trusted, right? Today there's more openness, and I think also the fact that, by being open, you are open to a much larger universe and not just the population within the country itself, right? Which is where you also want to be seen. You want to be seen on global platforms. You want to be perceived in a particular way. So I think the fact that, your question about government would need a reset in the way there is a perception around them. And I think it is a far more approachable entity today, especially as far as media is concerned, because even for the government now, they realize image building is very important.
Thank you. So last minute, Deepak, and then we wrap. Yeah.
So it's actually sad that, students of yours have this impression, but I wouldn't say it's not unfounded. They would have experienced it, and that's why they've, come to at it. But that also means that, and I'll say for myself at least, that we journalists haven't done a great job at it, that they've formed this perception, and that also means that the PR fraternity has had its way, that it's become PR journalism, if that's what your kids are talking about. But the fact remains that in this world where information comes in multiple forms and manner, yes, it's getting more increasingly difficult to cut the wheat from the chaff. I will tell you from my personal experience, 10 years ago or even 15 years ago, it was easy for me to just SMS, I wouldn't say WhatsApp back then, or call a CEO and say, can I get an interview, or go and meet people. Right now, the way corporate communications in PR also function is that they actually have a clear guideline. You will not talk to anyone in the media unless you're media trained, media guided, where you've been told what to say, what not to say. There are SEBI guidelines that we've heard here. You can't make forward-looking statements. It's getting increasingly difficult. But I also believe with so much of digital media in play, you have to figure out ways and means to still build your sources and get your information. Twitter is one method. Insta and WhatsApp chats are the other method. You have to work harder. There's no other way at it. And if, the kids of today have come to realize or accept or even understand this, then we journalists have to do a far better job at changing that perception.
Thank you, Deepak. So on that note, I'll end by saying my favorite definition of public relations is PR is doing good and then getting credit for it. And as practitioners here, we owe it to ourselves to be the author of action, to get companies to do the right things, to do good things. The attention will automatically follow. So on that optimistic note, may the best people win, and looking forward to a lovely evening of awards. Thank you, Deepak, Ratna, and I'm sorry, Mr. Legal Department, for not giving you the second question, but I really appreciate your presence over here. Thank you, Satwinder. Bye.
Thank you so much, panelists.